The cookie, the stranger, and the rain had started softly, like a whisper across the pavement, but it didn't take long before it was pouring hard. Water danced off car roofs, dripped from the edges of umbrellas, and soaked through the shoes of people trying to get home before nightfall. A small girl named Leela sat on the steps of a quiet bus stop. Her red raincoat zipped up to her chin. Her knees were pulled to her chest. In her tiny hand, she held one single cookie, wrapped carefully in a napkin. It was chocolate chip, her favorite. She had saved it all day, untouched in her backpack, waiting for the perfect moment to eat it. Beside her there was no one, just a cold, wet city and the low hum of traffic. Her mother was running late again. She worked double shifts at the hospital and sometimes forgot the time. Leela didn't complain. She was used to waiting, sometimes with books, sometimes with her drawings, and sometimes, like today, with her one special cookie. But today would not be like other days. About 10 feet away, under the cover of the next bench, a man sat. His long black coat was soaked at the edges. His head bowed low. He wasn't on a phone. He wasn't talking. He wasn't moving. His hands were folded between his knees, and every now and then, his shoulders gave the tiniest shiver. He looked sad. Not the kind of sad that came from losing an umbrella or missing a train. It was the quiet kind, the kind that made people forget to breathe, the kind that lived deep behind the eyes. Leela tilted her head. She didn't know who he was. He didn't seem scary. In fact, he looked like someone who hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time. She looked at her cookie, then back at the man, then at her cookie again. After a moment, she stood up. Slowly, with her tiny boots splashing in the puddles, she walked toward him. The man didn't look up. She stopped a few feet away. She was nervous, but something inside her heart pushed her forward. Something warm. "Excuse me," she said in a soft voice. The man slowly turned his head. His eyes met hers. They were kind eyes, but tired, very tired. "Yes?" he asked, his voice low, like it hadn't been used much that day. She held out the napkin. "You can have my cookie," she said. "You look like you need it more than me." For a moment, the man didn't speak. He just stared at her, at the little girl offering her only treat, her hands trembling slightly in the rain. And then very gently he reached out and took it. "Thank you," he whispered. She smiled, then sat down next to him. They didn't say much after that, just sat in silence, watching the rain fall. Two strangers, one cookie, and a moment that would change both of their lives. What Leela didn't know, what no one knew, was that the man beside her was Keanu Reeves. And he had just come from the hardest funeral of his life. He had said goodbye to someone he loved, someone who had reminded him of everything beautiful in the world, someone who had once told him that even the smallest kindness could save a person. Now, here was this child, offering him that kindness, without knowing who he was, without asking for anything in return. Keanu looked at the cookie in his hand, then at the little girl beside him. "Can I ask your name?" he said. "Leela," she replied. "That's a beautiful name," he said. "Thank you," she smiled, her feet swinging above the sidewalk. The bus didn't come for a long time, but neither of them noticed. And while the rain kept falling, something else began to rise in Keanu's heart, a feeling he thought he had lost. Not hope, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. He took a small bite of the cookie. It was soft, warm, and sweet. It tasted like the past, like home, like kindness. "This is the best cookie I've ever had," he said honestly. Leela beamed. "I made it with my mom. She taught me." Keanu nodded. "She must be very special." Leela shrugged. "She works a lot. She's a nurse. She helps people, even when she's tired." His eyes softened. "Sounds like a superhero." "She kind of is," Leela giggled. Then something happened. The sound of the rain, the quiet hum of the city, the taste of the cookie, it all came together. And in that moment, Keanu decided something simple but powerful. He would find her again, not because she gave him a cookie, but because in the middle of his darkness, a little girl saw him, really saw him. And without knowing anything about him, she gave him a piece of her heart. And in return, he would change her world. But for now, he said nothing, just sat beside her. both of them watching the rain dance across the street. That night, Keanu Reeves would disappear into the city, but he would remember the girl in the red coat, the girl who shared her only cookie, and the girl who reminded him that even the smallest act of kindness could light up the darkest sky. The story had only just begun, but already it was unforgettable. The red coat and the ripple. Keanu Reeves sat in the back seat of a quiet black car, his driver silent, the city lights slipping past like slow memories. He held the napkin from the cookie in his hand. It was crumpled now, but he couldn't let it go, not yet. It still smelled faintly of chocolate and vanilla and something else, something that reminded him of childhood, of quiet kitchens and warm hands. He didn't tell anyone what happened that afternoon. Not his assistant, not his manager, not even his sister, who called him later that evening just to check on him. He just kept replaying the moment over and over. The rain, the little red coat, the cookie, the eyes of a child who looked at him not like a celebrity, not like a stranger, but like a person. He hadn't felt like a person in a long time. Meanwhile, across the city, Leela was fast asleep. Her mom had finally picked her up after rushing out of her shift. She apologized over and over, but Leela just smiled and said, "It's okay, Mama. I made a new friend today." Her mom didn't ask much more. She was too tired. She tucked Leela in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Thank you for being so brave." But Leela didn't feel brave. She just felt warm. The next morning, Keanu stood in front of a mirror, his mind already made up. He had one question that wouldn't stop echoing in his mind: who was Leela? And more importantly, could he find her again? He didn't even know her last name, didn't know where she lived. All he had was a memory, and one blurry security camera photo from the gas station across the street. He made some quiet phone calls, not the kind that made headlines, the kind that moved quietly behind the curtain of fame. His team respected his privacy. They didn't ask why he wanted to know who the girl was. They just started tracing the footage, sir. One of them said later, "We've narrowed it down to a school nearby. She was wearing a backpack with the name Jefferson Elementary printed on it. It's a public school." Keanu nodded. "Reach out to the principal. Don't make it weird. Just say someone wants to donate anonymously to a child's education. Don't say who, and don't say why. Got it?" But the universe didn't need his help, because the universe was already working on its own. The very next day, a video appeared online. Not viral yet, just quietly uploaded by a bus stop camera technician testing new hardware. A short clip, 24 seconds long. In the video, you could see Leela walking toward Keanu in the rain, holding something wrapped in a napkin. There was no sound, but the image said everything. A child offering kindness to a stranger. One comment stood out under the video. "Is that Keanu Reeves?" Within hours, it exploded. The clip spread across Reddit, then Twitter, then Instagram. People began tagging each other, calling it the purest thing they'd seen all year. And they didn't care that it was grainy. They didn't care that Keanu said nothing. They cared that a little girl gave away her only cookie to someone who looked like they needed it. "We don't deserve kids like this," one person wrote. "I hope he finds her," wrote another. And somewhere, quietly, he was already trying. Back at the school, the principal watched the video in his office. He recognized the raincoat and the little swinging boots. "Leela," he whispered. He reached for the phone. When Lila's mom got the call, she didn't know what to think. The school wanted her to come in. No, Leela wasn't in trouble. No, she wasn't sick. It was something else. A man had come by the office. He wouldn't say who he was, just that he had a message for Leela, and he left something behind: a note and a small brown paper bag. Inside the bag, a cookie. Inside the note, just 5 words: "You gave me everything." Tears filled her eyes as she read it. She had no idea what it meant, but Leela did. She recognized the handwriting, the calmness in the way he had spoken, the silence of his eyes. She looked at the cookie, then hugged the note to her chest. "He remembered me," she whispered. For the next few days, everything changed. Reporters started calling. News vans parked outside the school. Strangers left flowers and letters at their door. But Lila's mother asked them kindly to go away. She's just a little girl, she said. Please let her be. And Keanu? He stayed quiet. Not a single tweet. Not a single interview. Just a private donation to the school, a scholarship in Lila's name, and a promise to meet again. But not as a stranger. Not this time. A week later, Lila stood in the school library. She had been called there for something special, but no one told her what. As she walked in, she saw someone sitting by the window, tall, quiet, a little nervous. He turned around slowly. "Hi, Lila," he said. Her eyes widened. Her hands covered her mouth. "You came back," she gasped. "Of course I did," he smiled. "You gave me a cookie. I had to return the favor." On the table beside him was a small plate. On it, 2 chocolate chip cookies. And just like that, they sat again. Not in the rain this time, not in silence, but with smiles and laughter and a story that was still writing itself. She didn't care that he was famous. She didn't even really understand what Keanu Reeves meant. To her, he was just the man who needed a cookie, and to him, she was the girl who reminded him what it meant to be human. And neither of them would ever forget. But the world wasn't done watching, because something much bigger was about to happen, and it all started with a second cookie, the promise, the cameras, and the storm. For 3 days after their meeting in the library, the world couldn't stop talking about it. What had begun as a blurry bus stop video had now turned into something much more, a story of hope in a tired world. Blogs called it a reminder that kindness still exists. News anchors referred to Lila as the girl who changed Keanu Reeves, and social media, it lit up with one word repeated over and over: real. But behind the headlines and hashtags, something real was growing between them. After their second meeting, Keanu and Lila made a quiet promise: no cameras, no flashing lights, just visits, just stories. He'd come by once a week to see her. Sometimes they'd read books in the school library. Other times they'd just sit in the garden and talk about dreams. And he always brought a cookie, a different flavor every time. To Lila, he was just Mr. Keanu. To Keanu, she was my favorite teacher. He would listen when she talked about her drawings and her worries. He would tell her about movies without saying he was in them. They'd laugh, talk about stars, ask questions about life. He once told her, "Some of the bravest people I've ever met were under 4 feet tall." She just giggled and said, "That's because we're closer to the ground, so we don't fall as hard." But not everyone liked how quiet they were. Trying to keep things, reporters kept circling the school. One even tried to sneak into the hallway to snap a photo of them sitting together. But the principal had already placed a sign on the office door: no interviews, no photos. This is about kindness, not headlines. But fame has a way of pushing its way in even when the doors are closed. One afternoon, Keanu and Lila were planting flowers together in the school's small garden when a teacher rushed out with a phone in her hand. "Mr. Reeves," she said breathlessly, "I think you need to see this." She turned the screen to him. A breaking news clip was playing. Exclusive: Hollywood actor's friendship with child draws backlash. Keanu's face tightened. The host on the video was saying, "Some people are wondering what is a world-famous actor doing spending so much time with a random child. Why all the secrecy?" Keanu sighed. "They don't understand," he said softly. Lila looked up at him. "Are they mad at you?" He shook his head. "They're confused. Sometimes when people see something they don't understand, they try to break it." Lila looked down at the soil. "Did I do something wrong?" Keanu kneeled beside her. "You did something right, and that scares people who've forgotten how to be kind." Later that night, Keanu met with his publicist. "They're pressuring you to make a statement," she said. "Explain why you're spending time with this girl, or it's going to get worse." Keanu looked at the city lights through the tall window. "You know," he said quietly, "no one asked for a statement when I went silent after my friend died. No one asked for a reason when I disappeared from the cameras for months. But the moment I sit with a child and talk about cookies, suddenly they care." The publicist waited. He turned to her. "I won't do a press conference. I won't explain love to people who measure life with headlines." But the pressure kept building, and it didn't stop at words. One morning Lila arrived at school, and her mother was pulled aside by a parent. "I'm not comfortable with what's happening," the woman whispered. "Why is an actor visiting our school so often?" Another said. "You're using your daughter for attention." And someone even suggested they were making it all up for money. When Lila's mom told Keanu later that evening, her hands were shaking. "I don't want this to hurt her," she said. Keanu nodded slowly. "Then I'll step back." But that night Lila cried harder than she ever had. She didn't want him to stop visiting. She didn't care who he was. All she knew was that her world had gotten brighter ever since the rainy day she gave away her cookie. So Keanu made a decision, not to run, not to hide. He would tell the truth, on a small stage, without a crowd, without flashing lights, without a suit. Keanu sat in front of a camera and recorded a short video. Just his face. No filters, no script. "I want to tell you a story," he began. "A little girl gave me a cookie once. She didn't know who I was. She just saw someone who looked sad. And that small act reminded me what life is about." His voice cracked a little. "I didn't ask to be her friend. She offered it freely. And it changed me, not because she gave me something, but because she saw me, really saw me." He paused. "This isn't about fame, or charity, or anything complicated. This is about kindness. And if that scares people, then maybe they need it more than anyone else." He finished with a simple line. "Sometimes the smallest heart can carry the biggest love." The video was uploaded quietly, no promotions, no hashtags. But by morning, it had reached over 12 million views. People from all over the world commented, "This made me cry. I forgot humans could be this beautiful. Thank you, Lila. Thank you, Keanu." And just like that, the storm turned, not because of anger, but because of truth. And while others were arguing online, Keanu and Lila were already back, in the garden, planting hope with their hands in the dirt. The world finally understood something. This wasn't a story about a celebrity and a child. It was about a stranger who needed to be seen. And a little girl who chose to see. But their journey was far from over, because the next person to call wasn't a reporter. It was someone from the hospital where Lila's mom worked, and what they said would change everything. The offer, the whisper, and the weight of the world. It was a Thursday evening when the phone rang. Lila's mom was folding laundry, her eyes heavy, her back aching from another long shift. She almost didn't answer it. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something inside her told her to pick it up. "Hello." The voice on the other end was kind, professional, but serious. "Hi, is this Miss Elena Hart?" She nodded, slowly unsure. "Yes, this is she. I'm calling on behalf of St. Bridget's Private Health Institute. We were recently informed about your daughter Lila's act of kindness, and we've been following the story. We'd like to speak with you about an opportunity, one that could change your daughter's life." Elena froze. The words didn't feel real. "What kind of opportunity?" she asked carefully. "A full scholarship, lifetime medical care for you and Lila, relocation assistance, and a seat for Lila in one of the most respected schools in the country. No cost, everything covered." Elena blinked. "Why?" The voice was calm. "Because people like your daughter deserve to grow in a place where their heart can shine brighter. We've never seen anything like her, and we think she could be someone the world remembers." Elena's hand gripped the side of the table. Her knees weakened. "But why now?" The caller paused. "Honestly, because Mr. Reeves just anonymously donated enough to our program to fund scholarships for 20 children, and he asked that one of them be for Lila." Elena put the phone down. She couldn't speak. The next day, Elena met Keanu at a quiet corner table of a tiny bakery near the school. He looked the same as always, humble, calm, and still a little unsure of his own greatness. She placed her hands on the table. "They called me, the hospital, the institute." He nodded. "I wanted to surprise you, but maybe that wasn't fair. You're offering us a whole new life." "No," he said softly. "She offered me a new life. I'm just passing it on." Elena's eyes welled with tears. "You don't owe us anything, I know," Keanu said. "But I don't do this because I owe you. I do it because she changed something in me, something I thought was gone." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Elena asked the question that had been haunting her since the call. What happens if we say yes? Keanu looked down. It means she gets more support, more peace, more of a chance to become who she already is inside. And what happens if we say no? Then we still meet on Tuesdays, and I still bring cookies. She laughed through her tears, but then her face grew serious again. This is a big change, she whispered. New school, new city, maybe even a new country. I'm just a nurse. We don't have family anywhere else. Keanu looked up at her. Then maybe you've got one now. Asterisk. But while the offer was generous, not everyone around them saw it the same way. When word spread that Keanu Reeves had arranged an elite school scholarship for Leela, critics returned. Some accused him of favoritism. Others called it publicity masked as charity. Online debates exploded. People began arguing not about Leela, but over her. Why her kid? There are thousands of kids who give away cookies. If he really cared, he'd help more, not just one. Celebrity savior complex, that's all this is. Keanu read the comments in silence. Then he turned off his phone. He'd learned a long time ago that helping one person was still helping. And Leela, she was not just a story. She was a girl, a heart, a future. Asterisk. Meanwhile, Leela stood at her bedroom window, hugging her notebook to her chest. She had overheard her mom on the phone earlier, whispering about moving, about a new place with better air and more light. Leela wasn't sure what it meant. So she did what she always did when she felt too much. She drew. In her drawing, a little girl in a red coat stood on a tall hill. Beside her was a man with kind eyes, holding a cookie in one hand and a flashlight in the other. They were shining the light down into a big city below, where children stood in shadows. She drew them smiling. Together. Asterisk. That Sunday, Keanu took Leela and her mom to the park. No reporters, no cameras, just three people trying to understand what the next chapter would look like. They sat on a bench, birds chirped. A nearby child flew a kite that dipped and soared like a paper dream. Keanu leaned in and asked gently, Leela, do you know what a legacy is? She shook her head. It's the story people remember about you when you're not in the room, or not in the world anymore. She thought about that. So it's like a long story. Yes, he smiled. And you've already started writing yours. She looked up at him. Will you be in my story? He looked away for a second, then nodded. If you let me, she grinned. Okay, she said, but only if you keep bringing cookies. He laughed. Deal. Asterisk. That night, Elena sat at her kitchen table with two envelopes. One held the paperwork for the new life. The other was an old bill for electricity she still hadn't paid. She looked at her sleeping daughter, peaceful, bright. She made the decision. Asterisk. They would go. Not because of the money, not because of the fame, but because one small act of kindness had grown into something that could no longer fit inside their little apartment. They were going to build something new, and they wouldn't be alone. Asterisk. But just as the world began to settle, something unexpected happened. A powerful studio executive known for his cold deals and calculated moves reached out to Keanu with a proposal. A movie. Based on the story, on Leela, on the cookie, on him. They said it would be the most touching film of the decade, and they were willing to pay millions. But they didn't want the truth. They wanted a rewritten version. A version without rain, without nurses, without the red coat. Just a story, not a soul. And Keanu now faced the hardest choice of all. Tell the real story, or protect the quiet world they had built. Asterisk. The rewrite, the silence, and the shattering letters sat unopened. On Keanu's desk. Thick cream paper, gold lettering, a red wax seal. From a studio that had created some of the most famous movies in the world. The offer was clear: tens of millions, total creative control, global release. But only if the story followed their vision. They wanted a little girl, yes, but not Leela. Not her red coat, not her tiny boots, or her nurse mother, or the bus stop in the rain. They wanted a prettier version, a safer version, one that sold tickets. They wanted to erase the heart and keep the shell. Keanu stared at the envelope. It felt like betrayal, not to himself but to Leela, because her story wasn't just about kindness. It was about reality, pain, struggle, a tired nurse and a lonely girl and a broken man meeting on the same rainy afternoon and changing each other forever. But before he could respond, the news broke. A leaked email from the studio. Speculation. Headlines. Keanu Reeves to produce movie based on viral girl's story. The internet went wild. Most people celebrated, but not everyone. Some said Leela was being used. Some said this was all a setup from the beginning. And Leela, just 10 years old, heard whispers in the school hallway. She's gonna be rich now. Maybe she faked the whole thing. Her mom probably planned it. And one kid, one older boy, said something that broke her. You're not special. He just felt sorry for you. She didn't cry at school. But that night, she went home and locked her door. Her mother knocked softly. Leela. No answer. Inside, Leela sat on the floor, holding the crumpled napkin Keanu had once given her, the one that had come with the cookie and the note that said, "You gave me everything." Now she wondered, had he meant it? Meanwhile, Keanu was in a hotel room, preparing to fly to New York for a meeting with the studio heads. His suitcase lay open, but his heart wasn't. He thought about Lila's drawing, the girl and the flashlight, the city below, the shadows they were trying to chase away. He thought about the way she looked at him, not as an actor, not as a hero, but as someone who needed a cookie. And he realized something terrifying. He hadn't asked her. He hadn't asked if she wanted the story told. He hadn't asked if she was ready. He'd let the world spin too fast, and now he had to stop it. He canceled his flight. He canceled the meeting, and he drove quietly, alone, back to the small apartment where Leela and her mother lived. When Elena opened the door, she looked exhausted. Not angry, just tired. She won't talk to me, she said. Keanu nodded slowly. Can I try? She stepped aside. He walked into the dim room, soft shadows dancing on the wall. The door to Lila's room was closed. He knocked gently. No reply. He sat down on the floor, back against the door, and began to speak. I was scared, he said. Scared of losing something I didn't even know I had found. He paused. You made me feel human again. Leela, not famous, not important, just human. He took a breath, and when the studio called, I thought maybe the world needed your story. But I never stopped to ask if you wanted that. Silence. Then the door creaked open just a little. He didn't turn around. He just kept talking. They don't want the real you, Leela. They want a cleaner version. A girl with perfect hair and no nurse mom and no rainy bus stop. They want magic without the truth. A pause. But you are the truth. The door opened fully now. Leela stood in her pajamas, her eyes puffy from crying. You weren't supposed to tell them, she whispered. I know, he said softly, and I won't. Not unless you say yes, and only if it's our story, the real one. She stared at him for a long moment, then walked over, sat down beside him, and leaned her head against his arm. Promise? She asked. I swear. He whispered. The next day, Keanu released a statement online. It was just a few lines long. Stories are powerful, but the most powerful ones are the ones we protect. Lila's story belongs to her, not to Hollywood, not to me. If she ever wants to share it, the world will listen. But until then, I'm going to do something rarer than acting. I'm going to be quiet. The internet responded with tears. People called it the most graceful no in celebrity history, but the story wasn't over. Because while Keanu had pulled the plug on the film, someone else hadn't. The studio, angry at losing the deal, announced they were moving forward anyway, with their version. Same premise, different names, a made-up girl, a fake bus stop. But everyone knew. And when the trailer dropped, it only took one day for it to get ratioed into the ground, because Lila's real story had already touched millions, and no actor, no budget, no rewritten lines could replace the truth of a child offering her only cookie to a stranger in the rain. A week later, Keanu and Leela stood in the school library again, just the two of them. He handed her a cookie, oatmeal raisin this time. You know, she said, people still think we're weird. He laughed. They're not wrong. She smiled. But you're my weird, and you're mine, he said. They clinked cookies like glasses of juice, and, in that quiet, cookie-filled corner of the world, something powerful happened. They rewrote the ending. Not with cameras, not with scripts. Just two hearts choosing kindness over attention. Love over noise, and truth over everything. ***. But as they left the library, Leela asked one final question. If you could go back to the moment we met, would you do anything different? Keanu stopped. Looked down at her. And said, yeah. She raised an eyebrow. What? He smiled. I would have brought to cookies. The stage, the letter, and the light that stayed. Spring came slowly to the city. The chill faded one soft breeze at a time, and trees started to bloom along the sidewalk like they had waited all winter just to be seen. Leela walked beside Keanu on a quiet Sunday afternoon, her red coat swinging beside her like a memory that had never left. Do you think people will forget? She asked, gently holding his hand. Some will, he said, but not the ones who felt it, not the ones who really saw you. She nodded. Okay, and just like that, they crossed the street. A girl with questions, a man with no answers, and a bond stronger than cameras and scripts. ***. A few days later, Lila's school was invited to a national kindness conference. It was being hosted at a grand hall in Washington, D.C., with students and speakers from around the world. The principal, smiling with quiet pride, asked if Leela would join. They want someone to speak about real kindness, he said. Someone who lives it. Leela didn't say yes right away. She needed time. But later that evening, while sitting at the kitchen table, she took out a piece of paper and began writing. Not a speech, a letter. ***. The hall was enormous. Long red curtains, lights like stars overhead, and hundreds of people seated, waiting. Most had never met her, but they had heard about the girl who gave her only cookie to a stranger in the rain, about how the stranger turned out to be someone the world knew but she didn't care, about how she stayed kind even when the world got loud. Leela stepped onto the stage slowly, her red coat buttoned neatly, her boots scuffed just enough to prove she was still a kid. She didn't stand at the microphone. She sat on a small chair that had been placed at the edge of the stage, her own request. She held the letter in her hand and looked up. Her voice was soft, but steady. This is not a speech, she said. It's a thank you. The hall went still. She read, Dear Mr. Keanu, I didn't give you the cookie because you were famous. I gave it because you looked like someone who had forgotten how to smile. And I know what that feels like, because sometimes I forget to, but you smiled after that, and you made me feel like someone who could make a difference, even if I'm just little. Thank you for not turning me into a story. Thank you for sitting with me in the rain. And thank you for always bringing cookies. This world is big, but I think one kind person can still be louder than all the noise. Love. Leela. There was silence. Then, slowly, the first applause. Then everyone. Not loud, not dramatic, but warm, full. Real. Keanu watched from backstage, his hand pressed over his heart. He didn't cry, but his eyes, they told a whole story of their own. ***. After the event, letters poured in. From other kids. From parents, from nurses who worked double shifts, and little boys who carried cookies in their backpacks, just in case someone looked sad. One letter simply said, My dad left. I didn't think kindness mattered anymore, but now I want to try again. ***. Weeks passed. Leela and her mom moved not far, just enough to breathe a little easier. The scholarship was still there, but fame never followed them, because they didn't let it. They visited the old school once a month, sometimes to say hi, sometimes to plant flowers. And on the bench near the bus stop, someone had carved a tiny message into the wood. Even one cookie can change a life. ***. As for the movie, the studio's fake version flopped. People said it felt hollow, forced, like a story with no soul. Because it was, and because the real story didn't belong to Hollywood. It belonged to a little girl who didn't expect anything in return, and a man who never expected to be saved. ***. Years later, when people would ask Keanu about the greatest role he ever played, he would smile and say, it wasn't a role. And when they asked him what he meant, he would just take out an old napkin, still folded gently in his wallet. On it, a child's messy handwriting, "You can have my cookie," ***, and somewhere, in a quiet kitchen filled with sunlight and soft laughter, a grown Leela would be teaching her daughter how to bake. "Why do you always make extra?" the little one would ask Dot, and Leela would smile, "Just in case someone out there needs one." Because the cookie wasn't the beginning, and it wasn't the end. It was the reminder that love doesn't need a stage. It only needs a moment, and a heart that's paying attention.